Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, My Classroom Economy Evaluation, an Experiential Approach to Building Youth Financial Literacy. My name is Hallie Leinhardt, and I'm the Outreach Specialist for the Center for Financial Security at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I will act as your host and facilitator of the webinar today. I'm just going to do a quick run-through of our timeline today. We're going to begin with presentations by our speakers, starting with opening remarks about the project from our funder of this research from the U.S. Treasury by Louisa Quitman. We will then be given some background on the My Classroom Economy project by Colin ORourke. And then next, Erin Standish of Palm Beach County will provide a classroom perspective of the project. And then we'll finish with Michael Collins presenting on the findings and implications of the study. After presentations, we will have time for Q&A, so please feel free to submit questions throughout the presentations. Use the Q&A box located on the left side of your screen to type in your questions, please. We are very fortunate to have the following presenters lined up to speak on today's webinar. We have Colin ORourke. He is our Senior Research Specialist at the Center for Financial Security at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We have Erin Standish, and he is the Financial Literacy Coordinator for the School District of Palm Beach County. And we have J. Michael Collins. He is the Faculty Director for the Center for Financial Security and is an Associate Professor in the La Follette School of Public Affairs and in the School of Human Ecology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We are happy to have Louisa Quitman with us today. She is the Director of Financial Security in the Office of Consumer Policy for the U.S. Treasury. And she will start things off today by sharing a few words about the project. Thank you, Louisa.
Thank you, Hallie, and good afternoon, and thanks for everyone for joining the webinar this afternoon. As Hallie said, I'm Louisa Quitman. I'm the Director for Financial Security at the U.S. Department of the Treasury. And we're so pleased to have had the opportunity to work closely with the Center for Financial Security over the past couple of years to provide financial support for the evaluation of My Classroom Economy curriculum, which you'll hear more about today. I want to congratulate the team led by Professor Michael Collins and Professor Elizabeth Otters-White at the University of Wisconsin, the lead authors of this research, along with Michael Batty and Colin ORourke, who participated on the research team. And I also want to thank Erin Standish and the team at the School District of Palm Beach County, Florida. The schools in Palm Beach County were pilot sites for the evaluation, and without their interest and support, the research would not have been possible. And finally, I also want to thank my colleague Jim Gatz here at Treasury, who has been the lead and liaison for the project on our end. A little context, the Treasury Department and the administration overall have been very supportive of opportunities to strengthen financial decision-making skills of individuals and families, and to help more individuals make use of safe and affordable financial services. The reality is that financial services are undergoing profound changes due to the availability of consumer information and the development of new technologies that use data in new ways. This data revolution is putting financial services into the hands of more people via their mobile phones and other platforms. But the expansion of financial services is not enough, and we know there's much more work to do to ensure that many more individuals have the skills and knowledge to make effective financial decisions and use these financial services to meet their needs and their goals. With this reality in mind, the Treasury Department created the Financial Empowerment Innovation Fund. Through this fund, we provide financial support for the development, testing, and evaluation of new methods, strategies, and products that promote access to safe and affordable financial services, and also improve the financial capability of Americans. We funded research in 3 areas: financial capability, decision-making in higher education, and innovations in payments and savings. The Center for Financial Security's evaluation of the My Classroom Economy program is among the first area of focus, financial capability. We were very intrigued and interested by the potential of My Classroom Economy for 3 reasons, which you'll hear more about. First, My Classroom Economy uses hands-on learning, which research has shown to be very important for teaching young people the basics of financial capability. Second, My Classroom Economy uses a dynamic approach in which financial issues are embedded into the school day without taking separate time needed for core requirements. And third, it's based on an approach that's free for teachers and schools to use. These last 2 items encourage the scalability of the model, which is of great interest to us as well. Finally, let me stress that the Department of the Treasury and the administration have been true believers in the power of research and the need for ongoing evaluation in the field of financial education and capability. We've been so pleased to work with the Center for Financial Security to administer this evaluation based on their thorough and thoughtful research design proposed and the high level of rigor in their approach, including the randomized control trial aspect of the study. This kind of strong research has been proven to be so important for the field to date, and we think that this research will continue to inform our work at the policy level and for providers and educators across the country. We want to thank the team at the University of Wisconsin and in Palm Beach for their great work, and we look forward to hearing this presentation today, and I'll turn it back to Hallie.
Thank you, Louisa. And I would like to turn it over to Colin ORourke.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank everyone for tuning in and thank Louisa and Aaron for joining us as presenters. And then we want to thank the Treasury Department for supporting this project and the teachers and staff of the School District of Palm Beach County for their efforts throughout the study. And we also acknowledge the efforts of volunteers at Vanguard who contributed to the teacher trainings and provided materials. So today I am going to spend a few minutes describing how My Classroom Economy works and why we're interested in evaluating it. Then I'll conclude with some information about our partnership with the School District of Palm Beach County and an overview of how the evaluation was implemented before turning it over to Aaron, who will talk about the project from the district's perspective. My Classroom Economy is an experiential financial education program. Materials are freely available for grades K through 12 on the program's website. Our evaluation focuses specifically on 4th and 5th grade students. A small number of 3rd grade classrooms also participated. In contrast to financial education programs based on lesson plans or standardized curriculum, My Classroom Economy takes an experiential approach. It gives students the opportunity to experience and practice financial decision-making in their classrooms. Here I've listed some of the core activities of the program, and I'll walk through them in a bit more detail on the next slides. But in general, with the program, teachers establish classroom-based economies. Students have jobs, earn classroom dollars through those jobs and through bonuses. Students may be subject to fines, they pay rent for their desks, and they participate in classroom stores and auctions. The program is customizable, and teachers may incorporate more advanced economic activities, things like loans. This next slide takes a step back and shows the progression of the program over the course of the school year. The amount of time each activity takes varies by teacher and classroom. The first phase occurs before, at the very start of the school year, where teachers print or create materials, select jobs, and generate lists of behaviors tied to bonuses and fines. Many teachers also involve students in these decisions, perhaps coming up with a list of bonuses with students themselves. And I do again want to mention that templates for all of these activities are available on the program's website, so much of the preparation is already started for teachers. Moving to phase 2, the program requires some introduction to students at the start of the school year, including assigning jobs and training students how to do them. Then the third phase is really where the bulk of the program takes place. It's those ongoing activities. I'll discuss those in a bit more detail on the next slide. And then the last phase is program wrap-up, including reflection and discussion of lessons learned. This slide lays out the core components of the program: jobs, rent, bonuses, and fines. Students may stick with one job for the whole year. Some teachers may reassign students at different points during the year. And My Classroom Economy does require students to pay rent for their desks, or students may save up enough money so they can purchase their desks instead of continuing to pay rent. A fifth activity not listed here is the auctions or classroom stores, which give students the opportunity to spend their classroom dollars. So that's a quick overview of what the program is and how it works. Now I want to talk a bit about why we were interested in evaluating this program. So existing studies, most existing studies on financial education focus on lesson plan or curriculum-based programs and on older students, mostly at the high school level. We were interested in evaluating My Classroom Economy's experiential approach because it gives students the opportunity to practice new behaviors potentially develop habits, and might impact their attitudes around money management. This again contrasts to approaches more focused on giving students new information, and in addition, experiential approaches like My Classroom Economy might help minimize time away from other classroom activities and reduce teacher training needs. And in addition to financial education, My Classroom Economy serves as a classroom management system, a system for teachers to promote positive behaviors, something that teachers must already do. And then there is a growing interest in financial education for younger students, elementary age students, because this is a time of great cognitive development and a time when children's understanding of economic concepts is starting to form. Our partnership with the School District of Palm Beach County started just under 2 years ago in early 2015. Erin will provide more information about the district, but here I'll just mention that the district is quite large and it serves a diverse student population. The project benefited from the district's strong support for financial education and the support of its research and evaluation department. We recruited schools and teachers at the end of the 2014-2015 school year before summer, and it was totally up to teachers and school administrators whether to get involved. So throughout this project, we tried our best to balance the project's requirements against teachers' already overburdened day-to-day responsibilities. Ultimately, 115 classrooms across 24 schools agreed to participate in the study with a total of nearly 2,000 students. Schools were randomly assigned to a treatment and comparison group, The treatment group started using the program at the start of the last school year of the 2015-2016 school year, and then the comparison group was required to delay using it for about 3 months until the start of the school district's second trimester. We then surveyed students at the start and end of the first trimester, the time when the treatment group had used the program, but the comparison group had not yet started using it. We also surveyed parents and teachers at the end of that first trimester and followed up with teachers again through another survey and interviews at the end of the school year. Michael Collins will discuss the results from those surveys later in the webinar. I am now going to turn it over to Aaron Standish, the district's financial literacy coordinator, to provide more information about the district's involvement and his perspectives both on My Classroom Economy and on the evaluation.
Thank you, Colin. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Aaron Standish. I am the Financial Literacy Coordinator, K-12 for the School District of Palm Beach County. I'm going to give you a little bit of background information about the school district to give you some perspective. I'm going to talk about a little bit why the School District of Palm Beach County was interested in the My Classroom Economy program and how it fits into the larger scale of what we're doing with financial literacy education from kindergarten up through 12th grade. Before I start, I would like to thank the University of Wisconsin Center for Financial Security first and foremost for the 1.5 to 2 years of work they've put in our school district with this program and conducting the research. Of course, I'd like to thank the U.S. Department of the Treasury for funding this research, making it possible. I'd like to thank the Vanguard volunteers who did spend some time in the School District of Palm Beach County helping train and support our teachers who implemented the program. And of course, I'd like to thank many of the administrators throughout our school district and the teachers who are implementing it through it. None of this is possible without their cooperation. So here's some quick background information on the actual school district where this research study took place. Obviously, the School District of Palm Beach County is located in Palm Beach County, Florida. It is a very large, both in terms of population and geographically. We have a population of about 1.4 million. If we were a state, we'd be the 39th largest state. Geographically, we're almost equal to the size of the state of Delaware. So it's quite a large district, and in the state of Florida, all school districts are county-based, meaning that we have quite a few students throughout our, spread throughout our school district. In fact, you can see what our 2016-2017 approximate enrollment is. We're looking at about 185 to 190,000 students across the K-12 spectrum. We have about 111 traditional elementary schools scattered throughout our district, including a number of charters. We also had a few involved in the research study. That leads to approximately 90,000 primary level students. We are also quite diverse in terms of both the cultural background of our students and the socioeconomic background. As you can see with the following statistics, about a third of our primary level students are white, about a third of our primary level students are Hispanic, about 28% of our primary level students are black, with the other 5 to 6% identifying as Asian or American Indian or other. As you can see, we also have quite a spread of socioeconomic status of our students, as a little over 60% of our primary students do qualify for free or reduced lunch. And out of those 111 elementary schools, a little over 50% of them are Title I schools. And approximately just under 20% of our primary level students are English language learners, meaning English is not their first language. So a little bit of the background in terms of what the school district of Palm Beach County has done and why we were interested in the My Classroom Economy program and partnering with the University of Wisconsin. It starts with there was a law passed in 2013 in the state of Florida that requires social studies standards to include financial literacy. In high school, although this is an elementary study, just to give you some perspective, in high school in the state of Florida, it is now a graduation requirement. This school year, the class of 2017 will be our first graduating class that's graduating with this financial literacy mandate. After the law was passed in 2013, shortly after that, the Florida Department of Education passed a very comprehensive set of financial literacy standards. Specifically in the state of Florida, you can see on the bottom there, a financial literacy strand was added to what are known as our next generation Sunshine State Standards for Social Studies. That was the 9th strand added in those standards. Specifically, it's 6 standards, and they were passed on 3 different levels. So we've got elementary financial literacy standards, we've got middle school financial literacy standards, we've got high school financial literacy standards. As I said, the high school financial literacy standards are part of a required credit in economics. They are taught with our economics course in high school. It's a 1-semester course. It is now called Economics with Financial Literacy. In middle school and in elementary, the benchmarks have been passed, the standards have been passed. They have not yet been placed in any sort of course progression. We have the standards, but the Florida Department of Education has yet to place them anywhere in any course, basically leaving it up to the district to decide how to use them. In the School District of Palm Beach County, we are committed to covering financial literacy from kindergarten up through 12th grade. So we have taken those grade 4 standards and sort of spread them across the elementary spectrum. Same with the grade 8 standards. We've taken those and sort of spread them across the middle school spectrum. A little bit more of the background of the standards that are in place in the state of Florida. The state of Florida in 2014 became the first state to adopt the Council for Economic Education's National Standards for Financial Literacy. Since a few other states, I know at least 3 other states have adopted those national standards. It says in almost its entirety. We adopted about 95% of the standards. They knocked a couple out. They changed some of the wording. But for the most part, we did adopt those Council for Economic Education national standards. Also important to understand in the School District of Palm Beach County is quite unique. We are operating under a grant through the generous support of a few of our community partners, where we have a financial literacy liaison, that is me, to serve the school district for any of the financial literacy needs, and ultimately to serve the community at large as well. We just ended our first 2-year grant cycle last school year, and we just entered this school year into a new 2-year grant cycle. We're going to start to focus a lot more on community events and trying to reach our students' parents as well. Our number 1 focus has been on teacher training. We understand that is one of the most important hurdles that stops a lot of teachers from integrating financial literacy education is the fact that they're not comfortable with the material. And so on that note, in the past 2 years, we have trained approximately 500 teachers throughout our district from K up through 12 in different financial literacy programs and material. We do boot camps each summer. We've really focused for 2 years on getting our teachers prepared, because we know very few teachers have actual formal training in financial literacy. So that's been our number 1 focus for quite a while. My Classroom Economy, like I said earlier, we took those grade 4 benchmarks and spread them across our elementary spectrum, and My Classroom Economy we had placed into our 4th grade level. And we created our own for our district. Like I said, we've got benchmarks, and the state has sort of left it up to the district to decide how to implement those. And in the 4th grade, we decided to go with My Classroom Economy as part of our financial literacy curriculum progression guide. On its own, My Classroom Economy, we did a crosswalk with our standards, and on its own, My Classroom Economy covers exactly half of the financial literacy benchmarks, 14 out of the 28. And it would be even more if you do. They do have some advanced modules that involve investing and involve insurance that aren't part of the regular program. We did not choose to do those, but those could also be done. You could cover even more of the benchmarks if you chose. A little bit of the logistics in terms of how we were able to get some of the teachers on board or some of the administrators of some of the schools on board. We went through quite an extensive recruiting process, really starting at the end of the 2014-2015 school year. We first targeted principals, then assistant principals, and then ultimately as we went into the 2015-2016 school year, we also targeted teachers. Again, we knew we had to train them. We weren't just going to give them the program and let them go. So we did just a 2-day blitz across the district. It was during our preschool sessions, the week before school starts. You had myself, you had Colin from the University of Wisconsin Center for Financial Security, and we had some Vanguard volunteers come down, and we went to 5 different locations over a span of 2 days. We trained as many as 30 in one session and as few as 3 in one of the sessions. And in the end, we trained 94 teachers. We did it in a 3-hour training session. Just got them prepared for the program, how to use it, what the study was all about, so on and so forth. And obviously, if you've read the study or seen the study, there were more than 94 teachers. We did add more teachers after the training sessions. We had teacher trainers. We only added them to schools who had teachers that were already trained. There was an incentive process involved with getting teachers. It wasn't just purely volunteer. It was volunteer, but there was some good incentives involved. They did receive funding to help them support their classroom auctions, which is a key component of the program, or classroom stores. We also gave them many resources. You can see the pictures at the bottom are during the teacher trainings, and in that lower right-hand picture, you can see there's a big box on everybody's that had every copy that was needed to implement the My Classroom Economy program was provided for them. They received a box of folders for each student. They received a clipboard. They received a cash box. They received all sorts of resources so that they could hit the ground running immediately when they began their school year. One of the reasons that our school district was very interested in My Classroom Economy is that it really doesn't require a lot of formal training on financial literacy. As I said before, it's one of the leading roadblocks to get more teachers teaching it, is they're not comfortable with it. This program you don't necessarily need to be an expert in financial literacy. You just really need to know how to implement the program itself. So this is a lot more different than a traditional stand and deliver lesson plan because the students are learning as they do, right? As they make their transactions, as they earn bonuses, as they get fines, as they update their ledgers. So that was one of the reasons I was very interested in seeing this implemented widespread across our district. And ultimately, elementary teachers are from a wide variety of backgrounds. They're a jack of many trades. Not necessarily financial literacy is not necessarily one of them. And even though many of our teachers aren't necessarily comfortable with financial literacy material, we were confident in this 3-hour training. We at least got them comfortable using the program, and they were able to immediately go out and implement it. And like I said, then the students learned as they did. And finally, we did receive at the end of our study period, or actually at the end of the school year, we did a number of different surveys, both formally and informally. And the one common theme was that there was very high satisfaction among teachers. A vast majority of them continued to use the program after the study period ended, which was November-ish. Many of them used it until the end of the year. And many of them are still using it this school year. I've already gone out this school year to a number of the classrooms and gone in and observed it in action. They're still using it. So that's always a good sign. And you can see there we gave some direct quotes from some of the teacher surveys we did. They want to implement it in all classrooms across the district. That would be great. One thing I haven't mentioned in that next quote is it does also enrich math skills. There's quite a few different points in the program where they have to add, subtract quite large numbers. So that's one way to get your foot in the door at this program, is talk about how it enriches math skills. Obviously supports classroom management. And ultimately we love it because it is preparing students for their future, like it says at the end. We definitely plan to continue using it in our district, plan to continue supporting it for 4th grade, and we've even suggested in some of my other trainings for kindergarten and 1st grade, I've even introduced the kindergarten and 1st grade program to it. So we're happy to see that we've seen some positive results already, and we're going to continue going with it well into the future.
Great, thanks, Aaron. This is Michael Collins. I want to start by echoing my thanks for Louisa on the Department of Treasury, and for Palm Beach and for Vanguard and all the participants in this, and especially for Colin and Aaron, as they worked so hard in the field last year with the teachers, and everything from getting the teachers ready to collecting data. And so thanks. It wouldn't have happened without your efforts. So what's exciting, I think, about this project is that we had a school district that was both at the cusp of being ready to implement something new and to try to increase its activity around financial competencies for elementary age students, and also was willing to engage in research on that. So not a lot of schools are willing to do that. So we, in Palm Beach, we focused on mostly 4th, but also 3rd and 5th grade classrooms. There's 115 total classrooms, so and actually more teachers than that, since some classrooms share teachers. 24 schools and principals took part, and that meant that if they weren't implementing My Classroom Economy in that first trimester of the fall, they were still implementing surveys with student assessments, and also parent assessments. So we had a total of almost 2,000, just under 2,000 student assessments that are part of the study, and these are for those students who replied or who filled out the assessment forms both in September and then again in November. So we have sort of a pre-post design. Remember that the classrooms are part of schools, so we have some schools that were randomly assigned to implement My Classroom Economy in the fall, and then other schools that were randomly assigned to wait until the winter trimester to implement. So we're able to compare those schools in that first period, that first trimester, who implemented My Classroom Economy, who were chosen to go first, versus that cohort of schools that was asked to delay. And that gives us a sort of close to an experimental design to be able to estimate the effects of My Classroom Economy. Our parent surveys, we had just about 750 parents complete surveys. These are just one time at the end of the process, but we thought it was important to get the parent feedback on the program and also the parents' perceptions of how the program is impacting their students. The changes that we looked at, so again, we're looking at some changes from September to November for the group that implemented, for the schools that implemented My Classroom Economy versus the group of schools that did not implement My Classroom Economy in that first trimester. And we had a quiz, and we were able to measure changes in this quiz score. So the quiz was a standardized 13-question financial capability quiz. It was something that we developed and pre-tested in advance so we could be able to use it in the field with this age group, and was appropriate for this age group. Although it's important to recall that while My Classroom Economy has learning objectives, it doesn't have a specific lesson plan or a set of lectures that defines topics and teaches students about what their financial capabilities should be. They learn them by doing. And so we're really measuring the amount of quote-unquote organic learning that's going on through the process, as opposed to what specific knowledge was taught by the teachers. So it's a little bit different than, say, a traditional course-based evaluation. And we also looked at some behavioral changes, so changes in students engaged in budgeting, so budgeting of their money, in some cases time. Their economic socialization, so how much are they engaging in real economic activities outside of school, whether it's at home or engaging in discussions around finances with their parents. So we have both changes in knowledge and changes in behaviors that we're estimating in this study. The measures were collected on the student side based on an assessment, or you can think about it as a survey. This is a pen and pencil survey. We had it available in English and some other languages. As Aaron mentioned, there's a lot of diversity in the school district, so we predominantly had Spanish, but other speaking students as well. It was collected at the school, so these surveys were taken in class during the school day and collected. And we're grateful to the University of Wisconsin Survey Center that has staff that regularly do school-based assessments like this, worked really closely with Aaron and his team to be able to distribute these to the schools, to each classroom, through the teachers, to be able to collect on these 2 different dates. And just barely missing a hurricane in the same process. So we looked at a total of 6 different areas, and I'll just give you an example of some of these questions because we don't have a lot of time to go into the measures, although I'm sure some people are interested in them. So the financial knowledge assessment, as I mentioned earlier, was based on a 13-item quiz, and so those questions were split about half and half between more mathematical, where there was some simple, addition, subtraction, or calculation the student had to do, and less mathematical. So an example of a sort of definitional question is here of a plan for spending your money is called A, and there's 4 items that you could choose from, and budget was probably the best answer of the options. In terms of budgeting, it was a series of questions, 5 or 6 questions that we asked for students about how they engage in budgeting and budgeting-related behavior. And so one of the example questions here is, how often do you have a plan for how you spend your money? The financial socialization, again, this is an example of the questions that were asked, but does your family talk about how you spend money? And then the economic experience, again, this is more real world outside of the classroom. Do you have a bank account in your own name? And then we had some other examples as well. So for each of these outcomes, we measured, between, I think the lowest number was 2 items in a scale and as high as 5 or 6 items in a scale. So we really tried to define what these outcomes were in advance, test our measures, and then had a finite set of outcomes that we were trying to measure based on these survey, the student assessment or student survey results. So this next slide is looking at the impacts of the program. So when I say impacts, I mean the change for the students who took part in My Classroom Economy compared to the change for the students who did not take part in My Classroom Economy. So it's the difference from the pre to the post, comparing the My Classroom Economy schools to the non-My Classroom Economy schools. So this is pretty close to a sort of experimental design in the school setting. And when we talk about the effects, one of the struggles we often have is, we could talk about how many more questions students got right, or how many more, the higher frequency that students had on some of these scales. But those are kind of abstract concepts. So a sort of a convention in the education evaluation field is to express the impacts as a fraction of the standard deviation of that measure. So it's sort of like of the noise or variance around the tendency, what share of it can be explained by a student attending a school with the My Classroom Economy assignment. So we think about those as one way to measure the impacts, the size of the impacts. We can also just talk about the percentage change. How much did that particular measure go up? So I'll mention both of those here. So I guess the first thing to focus on is that all the impacts, at least on this slide, are positive. We didn't find any negative effects of My Classroom Economy, and the effects that we found were positive, and they were statistically significant at the 5% level, which is sort of a convention in the field. So we found positive changes for those students who were attending the schools that were randomly assigned to My Classroom Economy. That 13-item knowledge scale, it went up about 0.13 of a standard deviation. So a sigma unit is a standard deviation, and what percent of the standard deviation it went up. So it went up about 1/10 of a standard deviation. So it's sort of a modest size effect in terms of the education literature, but remember, we're not talking about the effect of a year-long or a multi-year curriculum or an intensive training among students. We're talking about a 10-week economic simulation that was integrated into the school day. So it's, the effects are actually fairly impressive given the magnitude of the intervention. And if you want to think about that as what percent did scores go up, scores went up about 5%, about 4.9%, so about 5% change, extra change for the students who were in the My Classroom Economy schools. In terms of budgeting, we saw about, again, about a tenth of a standard deviation increase in students reporting budgeting behavior, and relative to the baseline, to that pre-survey, that was an increase of 9%, almost 10% increase in students self-reporting that they were engaging in some budgeting activities. In terms of economic socialization, students talking about personal finance issues with their parents or engaging in sort of a heightened attention to financial and economic issues at home and at school. That went up about a fifth of a standard deviation, 0.19, which is about a 5% increase, 4.7% increase. And then economic experience, these are students actually saying that they did things like having a bank account or spending an allowance or engaging in other kinds of economic behaviors outside of school. And that went up about, again, about a fifth of a standard deviation, about 0.21, which is almost an 11% increase, so 10.5% increase in students expressing that. So again, this is after a 10-week period, judging on the changes in the survey responses in September and again in November. And the changes are all relative to that other group of students who were attending schools that were not randomly assigned to My Classroom Economy. So, given the length and intensity of the program, we suspect, and we don't have the data to be able to test this, although we're certainly continuing to work with the district to look at more ways we can do analysis, we suspect that the longer the students are exposed to this, we might see even larger effects. And, you can imagine where, as teachers get better at running the program, as students get more experience with the program, the learning actually might grow over time. And that, the fact that we found effects in a relatively short time frame is pretty positive. I want to talk a little bit about what the data tells us about how students reacted. We heard a little bit about teachers' reaction to it from Aaron, but the majority of the students say that they at least bought one item within the 10 weeks of the program, the students who were at the My Classroom Economy schools. The rest were saving or otherwise trying to manage their expenses. 3 out of 4 were charged a fine. So they were charged a fine and paid a fine. So the fines, as you saw from some of the previous slides, could have been for classroom behavior, could have been for academic work behavior. But so the teachers were actively using this both as an incentive and as a sanction. About 95% of students reported receiving a bonus, which is pretty clear that then the teachers are using this as a way to incentivize certain behaviors in the classroom. At the end of the 10-week period, the average student who was in a My Classroom Economy classroom had a balance in their account of almost $1,300 My Classroom Economy dollars. I don't know what the exchange rate is to real dollars, but they certainly were active and they were building up a balance. And then what's interesting is about 1 in 3 students, or 32%, decided that rather than paying rent for their desk every week, so every week they get paid for their jobs in the classroom, and then they have to pay out some expenses, like the biggest one being rent for their desk. About a third of kids did the math and said, I'm better off actually if I buy my desk outright and I don't have to pay rent anymore. So an example of a real-world behavior that students can mimic through the simulation. Some of the other things that we saw in the data that were promising trends is that the students who were in the schools that offered My Classroom Economy were more likely to report having bank accounts based on the student and the parent data. They were also more likely to manage money outside of school, both, again, from the parent and student data. And then the parents were much, much more likely. So a parent whose child attended a My Classroom Economy school was about 2 or 3 times more likely to say, my child is learning about personal finances at school. So parents noticed the program. Parents who responded to the survey felt like there was a much stronger effort by the school to teach personal finances among the classrooms in the schools that offered My Classroom Economy. So parents noticed. As mentioned earlier, the teachers had a very high satisfaction rate, 95% that they would use them again. And it was interesting in their comments in the process study that we engaged in with some of the teachers, that they really saw it as powerful both as a financial education program, which they generally thought was important, but also as a classroom management system. So it played this dual role for them, which helped with their engagement and willingness to participate and cooperate. The other thing we heard is that whereas some teachers might be uncomfortable or not have a lot of confidence in their ability to teach economics or finance in general, especially teachers from other disciplines that are outside of math or quantitative fields, they didn't have that reticence with this program. So, having an experience of teaching financial content in the past wasn't critical for them to feel comfortable with classroom economy. Just the 3 hours of training and the support from Aaron and his team really helped the teachers feel like they could successfully run the My Classroom Economy program. And I think that's an important lesson from this. We've done other evaluations and studies where we've looked at financial education in schools, and implementation is always hard. Policymakers sometimes forget that teachers have a lot of other activities and responsibilities, and so adding one more may or may not be well received. And so this is a way to include the financial content and achieve those learning objectives in a way that is sometimes easier for students to take part in, and easier for teachers to be cooperative and support as well. I think we're very encouraged that we found these effects after 10 weeks, and our guess is that if we looked at a longer-term program, we'd find bigger effects. We did not find any effects in some measures that we had developed around planning, so planning for the future, or for students' self-reported self-control. Now, these are potentially programs that you think might influence things like planning, having a sort of future time horizon, as well as being better able to self-regulate. So one reason why we didn't find an effect here, maybe that there is an effect, maybe this is more of a personality trait, and a curriculum or a program won't affect that. Another is that our measures weren't very accurate in this area, which is possible because we're trying to get students to self-report these kinds of behaviors as opposed to other kinds of measures of teacher-reported or other kinds of measures of self-control and planning. And a third is that it didn't operate long enough, and that maybe after a year or longer exposure to the My Classroom Economy program, we might see those kinds of changes in time. Generally we didn't find very many barriers to implementation, and we're pretty also encouraged because we did a prior study also funded by the U.S. Treasury. We looked at a sort of classic 5-hour workshop lecture style financial education program, and the effects were pretty similar to the effects of this program. So we don't feel like this in any way is a second-class financial education. It is an alternative to a more traditional financial education and seems to be just about as effective. We would also say that there's probably a potential for schools who are considering implementing a financial education program that they combine a economic simulation like My Classroom Economy with a traditional financial education program. So you might imagine over the course of 3 or 4 years, students engage in some experiential learning and then some more integrated learning into their math, social studies, or other courses. So we think that combination might be even a more powerful 1-2 punch, so to speak. And then finally, encouraging more parent engagement in these topics seems like an area of future research and future programming. Parents are a key influencer of students' financial attitudes and financial behaviors, and so ways that programs like these can really engage with parents, get parents excited, and also parents have discomfort in talking about money with their kids, especially when we're talking about the limitations of money with kids. So there might be some real possibilities for these kinds of experiential programs to also more affirmatively work with parents and engage parents and children in these discussions and dialogues. Well, I will stop there and turn it over to Hallie for the Q&A.
Thanks, Michael, and thank you, Colin, Aaron. Thank you, Louisa. Really appreciated those presentations, and we do have some excellent questions that have come in. I'm going to start with a question aimed towards Aaron. And we had quite a few questions that were regarding this kind of topic of cost of the program and how this program was funded. So I'll kind of bundle these questions together. One was around if the state allocated funding is a sustainable model for implementing this program, and if not, would you be able to touch upon maybe other strategies for acquiring consistent funding? Another question, just to kind of piggyback on that, is about some of the costs that this program might incur in terms of like the auction items, just kind of these things that come along with putting a program like this into place well and making the students really excited about it.
Sure, yeah, I can cover some of that, and Colin, you may be able to cover some of that as well when we talk about the funding. Yeah, the first and foremost, I mean, the My Classroom Economy program is free. I don't know if we harped on that enough when we were talking about it, but it can be, you can go to myclassroomeconomy.org, and teachers are able to download really all aspects of the program for free, or they can order. I showed you the boxes in the presentation, which had all the copies of everything that a teacher would need. That can be ordered for free off of and delivered to a teacher's classroom. So there is a sustainability component to this program because there aren't the costs involved. And we do not have other external funding for other financial literacy programs. I don't know if that question was in there, but I'll cover it a little bit. We are, like I mentioned in the presentation, are lucky in our district to have partnerships with a few community partners who have externally funded our financial literacy efforts. I remember part of your question was about the auction items. They do not have to be tangible items. Yes, that was part of how we incentivized teachers during the study. Was we told them we would help them. We gave them some funding to help them purchase items for the auction, which got students a little bit more involved and engaged in the program. However, what we've suggested, and the program itself suggested, if you go through the teacher guide, is that they don't have to be tangible items. They can be lunch with a teacher, it can be free homework pass. I've got a laundry list of things that our teachers in our district have been very creative in terms of coming up with things to give out in the auction. And B, you can find parental support. There is a letter that goes with the program to hand out to the parents to explain to them what the program is, and you can ask for their support. And you can also ask for community support. When there's a letter in it that you can send out to local businesses to explain what the program is and to ask for donations of items. But I will tell you, our teachers who are doing it this year, they're not in the study period anymore, and many of them are still successfully implementing it, mainly with non-tangible items. I think that answered most components of the question.
Yes, I think it did. Nice job, Erin. Michael, I'm going to direct a question towards you, and this really has to do with kind of an idea that we've seen lately, that the younger you start children with financial literacy or financial education, the better. And so this program is it's a pretty young age group, but could this be something that, if tailored, towards social and reading levels, could this kind of program work in an even younger age group, first, second, third grade, maybe even kindergarten?
Yeah, that's a great observation and question. We would echo the sentiment that starting early really is a critical strategy. Our other folks on our team here have worked on projects even around, reading books with preschoolers, with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and some of the folks from UW Extension. So, starting early really is important in that sort of engagement and comfort level, and sort of breaking down that money as a taboo issue. Certainly, the My Classroom Economy approach could be used at earlier grade levels. In fact, they even have materials beginning at kindergarten age. There was a pragmatic reason why we chose this particular age group, and that really had to do with the fact that they had the reading and the independent ability to answer the surveys and do the assessments. And so it wasn't that we were opposed to researching the effects of a program like this at younger ages. It was sort of the more pragmatic or practical issues of doing the data collection that drove us towards this particular age group. But I certainly think there's a lot of scope to think about how the program might be used across different age groups, and sort of looking at what those effects would be sort of cumulatively over 3 or 4 different grade levels.
Thank you. And Colin, kind of on this similar note, there's been quite a few questions about this program, about My Classroom Economy being used in different settings, so not just in different age groups, but different settings. So somebody asked about whether it could possibly be tailored to use in a summer session or for a kind of special class for students in need of summer school, or whether different aspects could be adapted for settings outside of the classroom even, so like financial presentations or financial coaching were 2 of the things that were brought up. So I guess the question is really about how much of this, of My Classroom Economy, can really be taken and tailored to use in different settings outside of the classroom or within.
So I'm not as familiar with the use of My Classroom Economy in settings that are outside of schools. It seems like it is workable in a scenario where students or a group of children are meeting regularly for regular blocks of time. I could see it working in that case. I'm not sure about kind of taking bits and pieces from it. I think ideally it's been very well conceived, very well thought out in terms of how all the different pieces fit together as a functioning economy. So I'm not certain about the idea of pulling certain components of it out. I think it probably needs to be used as a cohesive program, but I don't see any. I don't have any examples offhand of how it might be used in those kind of extracurricular settings. But I think as long as people are meeting regularly with blocks of time to devote to the program, it can work.
Thanks, Colin. And sorry to put you on the spot with that question. I know that was a little bit different, but I did just receive some feedback from the My Classroom Economy team, who said that they are currently working on a My Home Economy concept. So that actually seems like that might kind of fit with that question, actually. So thank you for that, Colton. And then I have another question surrounding the parent involvement in this program. I know Michael touched on it a little bit regarding how financial literacy and how financial education can be improved even more by parent involvement. So Aaron, I'd like to ask you about the parent involvement in this program. I know it was a shorter time frame and it was within the school day, so maybe that was not as necessary, but how did parents react? How did they become involved in this program, if at all?
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, one thing we do have is we have the parent surveys. So I'd say in this program the parents aren't involved directly. What we do know, it may have been covered a little in the presentation, is that without question, and actually this is probably one of my favorite results out of this study, was that it showed that students were more likely to engage in money management behaviors outside of school, and that the students in the treatment group are more likely to have bank accounts, which presumably is done through their parents. So yes, the program itself, there's not necessarily a parent component to it, but as part of the study there was parent surveys done which showed that the students who were involved in the program went home and were involved in more money discussions with their parents than the students who were the comparison group and weren't involved in the program until later. So I think without doubt we've seen some positive results in terms of parent engagement with students about sort of money management skills and whatnot.
Great, thanks. And I have a question about some data analysis and whether the data can be broken down based on race or location within the county. And so Michael or Colin, not sure which one of you would like to tackle that one, but maybe start with Michael.
Yeah, so we do know in our data the characteristics of the school, the classroom, and in some cases the students. And then we also, we know the location of the schools as well. And so we did test for all those things to see whether, perhaps, we even knew things like, was this a classroom that had a higher on average math scores, or, had students who were more likely to get free and reduced price lunch. And we tested all of those, and we really didn't find any differential effects for any of these groups. In other words, no matter what the background, we saw pretty consistent gains across different groups. So it wasn't like this program only works for kids who do well at math, or only works for kids who are in more affluent schools. We saw pretty consistent effects across different types of schools and different types of students.
Great, thank you. And I have, I think I'm going to just pose one more question, and I think this is a really great kind of summarizing question for you, Michael, and that is, what is the most important finding or takeaway from this study, and why?
Yeah. Sum it all up in 10 seconds. My big takeaway from this is that the effects of an experiential learning, so a not a traditional lecture-style curriculum, are pretty close to the effects that we saw from a traditional lecture-style curriculum. And so in terms of learning, in terms of behavior, in terms of attitudes, those kinds of things. So we saw pretty strong effects from a much more sort of organic kind of an approach, and one that I think for at least some schools and some teachers, might be easier to implement than a sort of formalized curriculum that has to be implemented into the school calendar, into the school learning objectives and everything else. So it's another tool in the toolbox, but I think it certainly suggests that we need to be thinking more broadly about the ways that we ought to encourage financial capability and the development of financial capability among young people.
Great, thank you for that excellent wrap-up. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and thank Louisa Quitman, Colin ORourke, Aaron Standish, and Michael Collins for presenting today. Just as a reminder, this webinar will be archived on the CFS website within approximately 3 business days. The PowerPoint will be posted as well, so you can take a look at that on its own. And that will be on cfs.wisc.edu. If you do have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to me directly. My contact information is listed right there. And then also, please keep an eye out for our next webinar, which is slated to occur in October. We'll be sending a registration and an announcement of what exactly that webinar is shortly. And again, thank you for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.